thank you for joining this podcast with us. And I look forward to seeing what we can do going forward for our audience. So first things first, I think a introduction for who we both are and where we're going. So I'm Sarah, and I'm founder and director of the studio, URBΔN ŌM Yoga Studio. And I've been a teacher now for, 13 years. How about you now? How long has it been for you? Actually,
math isn't my strong point. No. 2007. So what's that? 18?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yes. So when did you become a senior yoga teacher?
Probably about 6 years ago.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
Everything blurs into the background. I'm sure it's about 6 years ago.
Yeah. Because we started teaching, so as senior teachers, that next step of teaching new yoga teachers and really stepping into that opportunity to guide them really and start developing the next generation of teachers. So that's been a while. You and I have been running that about 5 years.
So would have got senior just before that. Yeah, it's about 6. And that's gone really, really quickly.
It's been really fast.
So many people come through, trust in the process, and now they're out there teaching.
Exactly.
Like proud mum moments.
Exactly. So it's been, I think the biggest thing is that we weren't born Zen masters. We weren't born yoga practitioners, right? Like we really, what was it that got you into yoga? What was, give us your story on your background.
Yeah, so I would say I was probably quite late coming into yoga.
Yeah.
I didn't find it at kind of like 20s. I wasn't even looking, didn't know what yoga was. I would say during late teens, 20s, I was more of a gym person, running, going to the gym, even if I wasn't actually doing anything at the gym. But I had a gym membership, so I used to go to the gym.
I was a gym person.
I was a gym person. I'd meet a friend, have a coffee, but I was definitely a gym person.
That's funny.
And that was my form of exercise, I guess, was going to the gym. So I would think then probably I got into yoga in my early 30s, which I do think is comparatively quite late to a lot of people. So I did try yoga at my gym in my probably beginning of 30s, late 20s.
What did you think about yoga in the gym?
It wasn't about the yoga in the gym. It just wasn't me.
Okay.
I didn't realise at the time, which is something that we will touch on, that yoga was a big open, I don't know how to quite put it, but it's not just a single yoga. And someone says, go to yoga. You're like, don't like yoga. It's like, have you tried it? No. Yeah. So I made a friend come to yoga with me at the gym, and it was just slow. I'm obviously would like to run. That was my idea of the gym, where we did a few moves. It was really quiet. I just felt really awkward, if I'm honest. And I think that's a lot of it, how I felt. I felt awkward. This was like so not me. Afterwards, I was like, that didn't bring anything to the table. And I definitely didn't go back.
Yeah.
Just because when you're used to a lot of activity, I didn't feel anything. I just kind of felt nothing.
What was
really.
that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What have I just done? I've just wasted an hour laying down doing nothing.
Exactly.
And to be rude, I laughed.
Yeah.
And that was my nerves.
Yeah, of course.
Something out my comfort zone. I now realise I was like looking at my friend who were like, oh my God, what are we doing? Talking. Worst nightmare now. So that was kind of pushed away.
Isn't it amazing though that that's where you started? And I'll give you my story as well, but that's where we started. And I think it's so, we can relate so much to where new students do get started with yoga and what they're thinking and why it is, it's too fast, it's too slow, it's too hard. It's all of these different things, which we'll talk about in our next episode. But it's
also
crazy.
It is that realization now that as teachers, people do start laughing, they do start talking, but we realize it's because they feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and that's how they manage it. It's kind of a bit like, oh, I'm so awkward. This is like my friend, and what, we're just laying here, turning here, twisting here. It's like, I'll laugh. So, but then fast forward, life changes. My family and I, so 2 young boys were rubbish ages. 3 was 1, maybe 4, 3 years between them. So it was like 6 or 7. We made a jump to move to Thailand for a couple of years. So moving on to the island was beautiful, but I still wanted to exercise. So a friend on the island was actually a yoga teacher. She was like, oh, come to yoga to me. So of course I'm like, oh, really? I was like,
not yoga again.
I tried this before.
I tried this, it did not work.
Don't make me do it again. But I went. But, this wasn't a gym environment. This was beautiful wooden sala in a kind of a health spa outlook. You could hear the sea. You had beautiful tropical trees around you. And it was Iyengar based. So she was really strict. And I mean, really strict. We'll do it again. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know what? I like that.
Yeah, I know. I get it.
That is kind of, I like rules. I like structure.
Do you think, because you talked about the environment, like, because we'll come back to yoga in the gym and I'll talk to you about my story because I also had an experience in the very early stages of the gym. But the environment probably was very different if it's very bespoke to yoga.
Yeah.
And how, well, of course you're on the island as well, so even more so, but then also finding the style. But ultimately, I think there's such a big difference with yoga in a gym compared to yoga very specific.
Oh, totally.
Right?
I mean, in the gym, because we'll hit on it again, but depending what gym, you've got barbells being dropped.
That's
and above,
exactly my story.
and
That was
you're
my
kind
story.
of like, oh, actually, I'm getting this chill out bit, and like, doom, doom, and you're like,
It was already
whoa.
hard to relax. And then like, you've got like this see-through glass and then you can see everyone working out. And I was just like, this doesn't feel relaxing.
Yeah, it's totally different. But it was beautiful.
Oh, amazing.
But I think I liked that it was, what I would say was non-fluff.
Yeah.
She was like, do this, do that. No, you didn't do it right, do it again. I was like, whoa. But I left and I actually enjoyed it.
That
cool. Wasn't kind of like this earth-shattering, like I need to go back.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, I like that.
Okay.
I started running again first thing in the morning when it wasn't too hot. I would go to the odd ones, different styles. I didn't know what they were then, but she was definitely like the one that I would have said like, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do, when to do it.
I think the teachers make a big difference. So not only now the environment is making a difference, but the teacher, like if you find the right style, because you can go to someone that's really strict and that doesn't do it for some. It was good for me and it was good for you. But, sometimes that doesn't work. But I think you've got to find the right teacher and the right style as well.
But she, she was human as well. So we knew that she was strict, but then she was like, that's the style. Then afterwards she was a bit like, oh, jokey. You're like, oh, I like this. So that kind of continued. And then a actual yoga studio opened. So it's quite a small island. Koh Samui. It was small then anyway. I'm going back quite a while. It's like 2006-ish. And there's like news travels fast. Oh, there's this big studio opening. It's going to be amazing. I was like, oh, yoga studio. Have a bit of that. And it was hot yoga, right?
In a hot island.
Yoga.
You know what? There's a lot of hot yoga in Florida and people will say why and how, but it works for whatever reason.
And I remember saying to like family, it's like, oh, I'm going to this yoga studio, it's hot yoga. And they're like, you're nuts. And I was like, I know. So
why don't we just touch up on the point that we just love heat and maybe that's a big thing.
I'm part reptile anyway.
Exactly.
So even on a hot island, if it hit 26 degrees, I'll be a bit like, oh, it's a bit chilly today.
I'm the same.
Let me grab a jumper.
So that definitely, again, there's a person that, would want a hot yoga in a hot environment.
But I had no idea really of what this was.
Yeah.
All I know was it was going to be hot.
Okay.
And why not go along? 90 minutes in a hot room, 40 degrees, roughly 40% humidity. I must have been insane. But
why weren't you? So some people will hear that and they'll feel invigorated. Like, I want to try that. It sounds interesting. But some will say that sounds like a horrible situation. Yeah. So what was, I guess the heat was attractive?
I think it was probably curious.
Okay.
It's like, there's this studio opening. I need to have a bit of that.
And you've got an exercise background. You've done different things. Maybe that helps as well,
Yeah. So I went.
Nice.
And so it was a little cafe underneath. You walked up, bright lights, whole mirrored wall. which is my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
I hate looking at myself, hate my reflection. And there was this big mirror, and that mirror and me. Obviously other people there too. And we started hot. We got hotter and hotter and hotter, and we got sweatier. But they had little cloths that you could wipe your brow with.
Nice.
Nice little touch. But again, it was the fact that it was dialogue-led. So they were telling us what to do, how to do it, really clear and concise. And that gave me kind of this focus. Halfway through, I probably thought what am I doing? But I carried on. And I felt amazing afterwards. I felt as though I'd really achieved something.
Yeah.
And the best bit was being somewhere where you don't really know anybody. It gave everybody something to talk about afterwards. So, there was lots of different languages, lots of different cultures there. But you had that kind of this love for yoga, and it'd be like, come next week. Oh, come next week. Come tomorrow. And pretty soon I was really hooked. For whatever reason it just made me feel really, I'd perhaps say it made me feel alive.
Yeah, it's invigorating. I think I would say that.
I like to ache afterwards, but basically I had a workout.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what I wanted. Exercise predominantly was what I was looking for. It was nice being around other people. It started to feel that I was becoming part of this community. Yeah. So that's how I really, I guess, got into what I would then say became a love for yoga. And that's where it started off. And it was then that I had the opportunity, after about a year or so, they were running their first yoga teacher training program. So I was kind of sitting on the fence of I'm not good enough.
Yeah, you're fast into it, I think.
I think I was.
Yeah.
And
I was too, actually. But it's just, I think if you find the right place and if it clicks, it's easy to go down that.
I think it just kind of had to sit with why did I want to do it, and what would I get from doing it?
Sure.
And I think at the time, if I'd have been maybe in a different country, different circumstances, I might have thought I can take my time, do it later. But I just got to put just do it. Do something for you. Yeah. For me, being a mum, doing everything for everybody else. Yeah. Didn't really have a career behind me. Yeah. And I just really liked it. And I actually felt I was good at it.
Yeah.
You can't be good at yoga, right?
No.
But I actually, for once, felt like my body was moving and it felt really well oiled. And great. I wanted to share this with people that, whether it's for exercise or something else, so that they can kind of come on that journey. So I got accepted onto the course because although I hadn't had years and years of practice.
What was the requirement at your time? So ours was 2 years as well, but I didn't have that.
I think it was probably 2-3 years-ish. I honestly can't remember. Yeah. But I spoke to them, but because they'd seen my practice, literally I was going every day.
You were consistent. I think that's what happened with us.
I was showing up.
Yeah,
90
consistent.
minutes. Yeah. Whether I really felt like it when I got up, I still went because I knew that the way that I felt afterwards was well worth that, dragging yourself there, getting hot and stuffy. So, and it's also something then that I knew that I could bring back to the UK when I came home. Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't have always come as hot because there wasn't really hot much. I didn't even know what hot was before I went out there. Yeah. So it's something that I could bring back with the scope then to building myself a career. Once the boys started to get a little bit older.
That's really, that's a really great story back on how it started.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the main thing really is as we get started on this podcast is who are we really, and what was our story? And then, and what is our expertise so far? And what have we seen? And how can we, create something that allows others to really understand what yoga is beyond the mat, off of that mat, because really it's something that I think anything can be life-changing, right? Anything, any kind of fitness. And my story is the complete opposite, which is actually quite interesting to hear two different, there's similarities, but there's two different ways of getting into it.
Yeah, but I think it was kind of during teacher training, obviously you dive into a lot more than the physical aspects of it. And because I felt so good afterwards, I was thinking, what is that difference?
Yes.
You know, I was going to the gym.
Why am I feeling like this?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to the gym. Nothing changed.
Yeah.
I was on that little hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And then I began to think, like, why did I really go to the gym? And I was probably going to the gym because I was trying to conform to being to this certain size, this certain shape. So I suppose I've always had like low self-esteem, low body confidence, the way that I look. So by going to the gym, I was like trying to get my thighs a little thinner. I was trying to do this. But to be honest, it's kind of punishment because it's a bit like, I've eaten too much tonight, so I better hit the gym and I better run a little bit further or do a little bit extra because of X, Y, and Z. So I mean, now I go to the gym, but I do it because I'm of an age where I need to go to the gym. I now
bone density, muscular.
Exactly. You know, you need that push, you need that pull. And I need it for cardiovascular, and I do it for health benefits. I don't do it now for punishment.
Yeah, adrenaline and a punishment.
Yeah.
It seems, you hear themes, not everyone, but you'll hear themes on what, it's high adrenaline, I think, as well, right?
And by going into yoga, especially in a hot room and looking at yourself in the mirror, it is so easy to criticize. It's like, I can't go to yoga because I just look too fat.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go because for whatever reason, today's, I'm too bloated, can't go. Or And to look in a mirror when you don't like looking in the mirror because you critique yourself.
Yeah.
But then finally something switches. So it got to the point during 90 minutes of practice, staring in a mirror at yourself, I wasn't looking at myself. I wasn't critiquing. And I sometimes
think hot yoga keeps you really focused, though. I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like, because we talked about the gym being punishment. Obviously, this hot yoga sounds like punishment for others, but if it works, it works, you know? But I do think that because of it being hot and because of it being stuffy and you just got to keep moving, I think that really helps keep your mind on track, even if you are looking at the mirror and you're hearing all these voices, but actually you don't have time to hear these voices, right?
And that's the beauty of it being kind of dialogue.
Yeah.
So even if your mind did switch off, somebody brings you back because they're kind of like, where are my feet? Oh, I've missed a bit. Yeah, now it's that focus, that clarity. And eventually I was just something in the mirror moving.
Yeah.
And I actually felt graceful. You know, you're doing a pose like standing bow pulling pose, which, you know, you'll come across, come to class and find it. And, to feel kind of that way when you've never really felt like that.
Yeah.
It's
grace is a big thing. I think I can understand because my teacher would call it grace. Like you step forward, you step back, because there's a lot of functional movement in yoga. Like you've got to step forward, you got to lift up, you got to go, you've got to use your body in so many different ways. That she had said that word grace. And it doesn't make sense in the beginning because you just need to link up your breathing and your flexibility and your strength. But because yoga is asking you to do all of that, the practice is asking you to do all of that, I think grace is a big keyword because you do start to feel a little bit more connected. And I think that's the gracefulness because you connect your body moving forward and back.
But I think that's the thing that it is that connection. Exactly as you said, I actually started to connect to my body. I was disconnected.
Yeah.
Totally disconnected.
Yeah.
It was just, we're doing this, doing that. I didn't really care how my body felt.
Yeah.
And then it
what that even means. Like what does your body, how could it feel good in a different way? Not just like, oh, I've worked out good, but actually calm or whatever that good feeling is. Because I think it's really still hard to describe how good you can feel after it.
It is, but I definitely think it is getting back to that. That is that connection. And I was breathing,
I know. I think the breath is the game changer.
And I think it is. And if we were to look at what maybe differentiates yoga from other forms of exercise, and I do think it's the breath.
Yeah, I think that's just kind
and
of
it's the breath that calms us. It's calming our central nervous system.
Yeah.
And I think it's also working and moving with intention.
Yeah. Moving with intention is a big thing as well. You're not just moving. Yeah, these are great ways I think that yoga has been different for me, or how yoga is different for a lot of people.
Yeah. And if, backtracking to go back now, if I was to go into some of the gyms, and we work quite a lot with alignment in yoga. And sometimes I'm kind of, but oh my, look at the way they're throwing themselves. And oh, be careful. And you're kind of like, just let it go. Just let it go. They're absolutely fine. And it's that calming essence. I'm not this, like we said, Zen, calm people. We have to learn that.
No, exactly.
And that comes from, I think, persistence, patience, turning up.
Doing the practice.
And practicing.
Absolutely. The breathing it's ultimately what perhaps changes us by breathing well, or learning how to breathe well, or not knowing that you were not breathing well until you practice it and practice it. And of course, we go into it at a deeper level when we are in a teacher training program, because we do. And then of course, after teacher training, we do courses, we do workshops. You know, the more you're in that lifestyle, I think that's ultimately the more you get into it.
You realize that even at the start of your beginning of your teacher training, you actually don't really know anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You've just been giving this like certificate.
Even after
off you go.
Exactly.
It's like, off you go. You're kind of safe to go and teach now.
But I think, the learning definitely is, I think the thing is, the learning is life though. So here's what they'll say about yoga, and I'll share my story as well. But I love that it's said that it's the science of self-mastery, so you're mastering your poses, right? At a very physical level, you are learning to move your body or stay still in a balance, and you're learning to master your physical poses. But I think ultimately you're learning to master your breath. You're learning to master patience if you're in a, depending on which kind of yoga class you're going to. I think you are learning to master your emotions in some ways, because hot yoga in particular, I think it tests you in a different way. And so I think that the science of self-mastery is incredible. I think that really lands with me, because you're just on this process of learning to master your emotions, and maybe that's taken in a negative way, because you'll hear about like self-discipline, and discipline can be such a negative word, right? But the idea like is different, right? It's in a very forgiving, like no pressure way.
No, I think it is. I think you're dead right. It is actually emotions as well, because we're often taught to withhold emotions. Society around us.
It's uncomfortable.
We make people uncomfortable if we were to cry. That person feels uncomfortable because they're crying. The person witnesses them crying feels uncomfortable because nobody knows what to do.
So exactly. It's kind of like, how do you fix the situation? Exactly.
You know what? These things are normal. know, I've cried on my mat. I've done just laid on my mat and done nothing, fallen asleep on my mat. That is yoga.
Our mat has definitely, it tells our story though, right? Like, cause you'll do yoga when you're feeling good. You'll do yoga when you're not doing well. I mean, the idea is that you show up and you transform what you've got into something else. And we'll keep going through these different sections, I think, to really dive into what yoga is off of the mat. But I do agree.
I think what I also found was it was a community.
Exactly.
I'd moved away, didn't really know people. And it was just that nice sense of meeting people afterwards, staying, having a little chat.
Well, even more so, do you notice that? So you had talked about like emotions, we're talking about emotions. We're talking about like it opens the door for us to, I think it opens the door to ourselves, emotions, you're going into the body, you're going into, we know this now, but you're going into muscles, you're going into connective tissue. And so you become softer, right? Physically, you'll become softer, and mentally, emotionally, you become softer. So can you imagine a community built on that? There's so much more authenticity, perhaps. There's so much more like, because I think communities form in every which way, right? Like there's communities, there's gym communities, there's mom communities, there's, business communities, there's different kinds of communities out there. But I felt like yoga just felt like a safe place.
I was going to say it's more of a safe place. where I don't think there's judgment.
Yeah.
And when people say like, oh, I don't go to yoga because I'm no good. Nobody was, unless kind of like you're double jointed, you've come from a dance background, then you might be able to physically make those shapes look amazing. But it doesn't mean that you're breathing well. It doesn't mean something's going on up here.
Exactly.
So I just think it's that point of bringing everything together in that safe space where you can have emotions out there.
Yeah. And I mean, yoga,
sharing them.
Exactly. And not exactly opening up because, I mean, well, you don't do it in the classes, so to speak, but actually it's the workshops and the events that I was able to meet people and talk to people outside of just a class environment or after class and getting to know, because you'll see the same people in class over and over again. And so if it's not going to a workshop, it tends to be after class that you just start talking right at like the shoe rack because, we've got to put our shoes on. So that's where the conversation happens, But there's like this relaxation element at the end of yoga. So I think like you're more relaxed to talk to people. There's more like the vulnerability or, and again, these are emotional things. I think yoga can look very intimate and very vulnerable in general. You're on the floor, you're barefoot, you're lying down. Like it's not very normal.
Sometimes not graceful poses.
And not graceful, But I think it's that, again, there's this breath work and then there's this relaxation that happens alongside it. And so maybe people are a lot more relaxed after. But again, you can see that in other fitness and exercise communities because you have been able to tire yourself. So there is a relaxation. But I think
it's the reason why you're tiring yourself. Isn't it, as well?
It's different.
It's not where I was escaping from something, I was escaping as like, I didn't really know me.
Yeah.
I mean, who does know themselves? When people go like, I find that a really bizarre question.
Yeah.
I don't really know me.
Yeah. Well, we identify to what we are. Like if we're, whatever we do for our work or whatever we do in our home and our relationships, but that's who our identity comes from other people telling us what we are.
I think, we're chameleons, aren't we?
Yeah.
You're one
adaptation.
thing teaching, you're one thing with your husband, you're one thing with your children.
Yeah.
And what you are maybe at home, people don't always see that.
Yeah.
Everyone comes out to see this calm Zen person. At home, you're like, get here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll talk more about, my story and how this has happened. And so very similar in a sense that when I had first gone to yoga, so I can't even remember how I heard about or knew about yoga, but I was in a period of transition, a difficult time. And sometimes these things are what pushes us to go into exercise. So if exercise was already a part of your lifestyle, yoga tends to be a part of that because you'll see it in the gym, etc. Yeah. But I guess what got you into exercise, because my story is that I didn't like to move. Like I did not like exercise. I wasn't the most athletic. I was a book reader. I liked, and that's actually my journey into yoga because my comfort zone was reading books. I loved reading and writing. I was an imaginative, I had a big imagination when I was young and I loved writing stories. So I wasn't physical and I wasn't, and coming from an Eastern background, there's a lot more emphasis growing up in more learning, more like brain development rather than physical development. That's not actually a big thing when I was growing up, in my culture. So the physical aspect was the last thing in my mind. But isn't it funny though? Because yoga, of course, originates from the East. Yeah. And when you get into yoga, they'll say actually the physical practice, even though we're hyper focused on the physical practice of yoga, is that the yoga was more about who you are, how you interact with the world. Like you know that later, but of course you come into it physically, right? So for me, I actually came into it more through academics, more through reading. And so when I was going through a hard time and I was going through this period of change, and it was in my 20s, but actually in my teacher training program, there weren't that many in our 20s. There was actually a wide variety. So we had a few in our 20s, a few in our 30s, a few in our 40s. So actually we did have a balanced approach, just by luck. I don't know if that was, how it was previously and after our cohorts, but in our studio, there was, because the studio offered a mixture of different classes, soft classes, hard classes, powerful classes, hot yoga. There was a mixture of anyone from their 20s to their 50s and 60s, coming for different reasons. So I think that was why our program was balanced in that way as well. But yeah, I think I was trying to find a better way, but I did it through reading because that was my outlet. That was my way of learning something.
I can just imagine that Sarah sat
Do you?
there.
I know. That's
so cute.
Just trying to figure out like, how do I fix myself? And so I'm like,
Sarah's book, Fix Yourself 101.
Self-help. And it really was how I started to learn about yoga. So I think it must have been these self-help books will talk about breathing. They'll talk about yoga. I think that's the thing. And I think that's how I was exposed to yoga, was because the first thing was psychology, like more of the self-help stuff that I got into. And then yoga was a part of self-help, but I didn't realize. And so then I'm like, okay, I've got to find a yoga class because one has to, obviously do with the other. And I was doing the gym at the time. I was going because I had a feeling, I just knew that if I wanted to get mentally, emotionally strong, I had to get physically strong. But I really didn't like the gym. I really didn't like running on the treadmill. It just felt monotonous to me. It just felt boring with a friend, without a friend. I just felt like it is boring. It is boring. Okay. I mean, we're going to have some gym goers that are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, no, it's not boring. But I think for me, it didn't feel very expressive, like dance, creative. It just felt really repetitive, but I just felt like that was the way to start getting stronger. So while I was doing the gym once a week, things like that, it was the books and the reading, and so then I touched upon yoga in that way. And I was like, okay, I need to find a yoga class. The first class I went into, and I know you guys make fun of me because, Sarah's so flexible, Sarah's so strong. Let me tell you my first class.
Sarah bends in half.
No, let me tell you my first class. I go and I don't know what vinyasa means. Just like normal people are going to look at a yoga schedule and they're going to be like, what is Hatha 1 compared to Vinyasa 1? That's what I was looking at. So they didn't have English names. Like it was Hatha 1 or Vinyasa 1. So, and then they had Hatha 2 and Vinyasa 2. So all I knew was I needed to go to the level 1, but I chose Vinyasa instead of Hatha. Now, if anyone knows yoga, Vinyasa is incredibly strong. And so Hatha would have been the right one. So I go to Vinyasa level 1. And now it's in Florida, and the owner of the studio was an ex-dancer as well. So she's attracting a lot of ex-athletes, a lot of, ex-dancers. And it was like headstand and chin stand and all of these different poses. And they're like moving gracefully. And I'm in the back and I've got my socks on. Now I know, when beginners come in and you've got your socks on because naturally you don't want to be barefoot.
Yeah.
So I've got my socks on, I'm sliding and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I'm already feeling bad about myself, like in general, because it's a period of like not knowing who I am. And it was really overwhelming. And so I think I left early. I think I was just like, I couldn't take it anymore. And it was like a 75-minute class. So that was my first experience. Now, the studio was quite relaxed. So the doors were open. You could leave early if you knew that person. I know that later, like how the studio was. She didn't start on time. Like it was great. It was a community of what they did. So then I go back to my books. So where do
I find this? What page? Do I take my socks off? How to dress for yoga?
What was that? So I'm looking for like vinyasa. Tell me what vinyasa is, because I'm like, there must be more than the physical stuff that these people are doing. And so I go back to my books and I get back into like the philosophy. I really start reading more about yoga now that I've done the class, and now I go back to my books, and that was like my way.
Sarah's done one class. She knows yoga.
So I'm like,
I've read the book. I've finished my class.
I've done the class. So I know what yoga looks like now in a physical practice, but this doesn't feel like yoga. So I'm going to go back to my books and read what this means. Then I start understanding what Hatha is, what Vinyasa is. So I'm starting to make a better choice now. The next time I go to the studio, I'm making a better class choice. So I go to Hatha 1, and that's exactly where I needed to be. It was the right pace. It was the right teacher. It was the right learning environment. Same studio, just a different class, just a different teacher. And it's a game changer. So actually that's really important, right? Finding the right class and the right stage of where you are. And I don't think we're educated enough on how to make those choices, or at least I wasn't 13 years ago. And again, yoga's quite a high culture, in the States, yoga's really accessible. Small towns will have like 5 studios, So it's really accessible and it's easy to access. But again, they would be still more traditional names and traditional, Sanskrit names and things like that. I think nowadays they've probably got more practical ways of teaching yoga, but I think back then, would you say that it was a little bit more embedded in tradition, but now I think you've got more modern?
I've come in from it from more of a modern approach,
That's
I guess.
true. Yeah, that's true.
I was on an island, to say there was one on every corner is like, no.
Yeah, that's true.
With all the different health resorts, obviously there's a lot of fasting places. Yeah. So they would have like very gentle stretching yoga.
Yeah.
And
natural coconut water, just whenever you needed it.
Finished class, just go and grab one. I remember going into a different sala up in the trees, which was beautiful, and kind of hanging off of a, I don't even know what to call it. It was kind of fencing. Can't think of the word, but you would kind of like hang over it, and somebody would hold your feet. I don't know what we were aiming to do, but I think it might be helping decompress the spine.
Now that we know the technical ways of actually doing these things.
It's kind of like, I'll do that. If you tell me to do that, I'll do that. So where I wasn't really exposed to a lot of different styles. All I know was I liked hot yoga, so I went to hot yoga.
Yeah.
I still went to the classes. I know one that was Iyengar based, so very using a lot of props.
Did you know what Iyengar meant though? Like, did you look it up or?
I looked it up.
Okay. Yeah. So it's because I think it's so important to understand. And I think that is the biggest thing is I love traditional yoga, Shivananda, Jivamukti, like great, but I've been doing it for a while. And so now I've been curious about it for a while. So I actually do I'll go to a Shivananda class. I've got, Jivamukti. I've seen what that means. Yeah. But I think at the time when you're starting out, you don't know what any of this is, right?
Yeah. Because I didn't have that exposure to different studios. We would have covered different types of yoga during teacher training of what they were.
Yeah.
But going back to the UK, then I'd be like, oh, let's go here. What's this?
Yeah.
Have a quick look in the book.
The main thing is use Google, use a book and find out what those names are.
Well, the thing is though, even now, things have evolved so much, I didn't really use computers then.
Yeah,
I didn't need to. Where now, your phones, Google,
it's
tell me
right
what
at your
this is, tell me to go here.
Which is probably, again, a reason why we're overstimulated, but it also, you're accessing so much information, which is so good and so hard, which we won't go down that rabbit hole just yet. But it's definitely where yoga can be such a modern day, like anecdote for modern day living, but we'll talk about that later because there's so many different caveats on this conversation.
It is. But so Sarah just pops into chin stand now.
Yeah.
So she'll just say, let's have a conversation. Oh, chin stand.
Well, I will say to you, I think that what happened was my body was really unwell. I really had a lot of different difficulties with self-image and all of these different things I was going through as well. And so it didn't move that way. My body didn't move that way in the beginning. But what ended up happening was because I was exposed to it, because of the natural heat, it was helping me open up that. Because if I go into a gym, it's really highly AC'd. Like when you are in the States, when you're in Florida, like you'll feel the heat, but actually movie theaters, restaurants, any indoor place, it's really cold in there. And so the yoga studio it had hot yoga, like just not like infrared heaters around, but it wasn't a hot yoga studio only. It was just a regular studio in Florida that just had their doors open. And of course it's already warm or hot. So my teacher was really into natural temperature, right? The natural heat and moving in that natural heat environment. And it was just, now we know how incredible natural heat is and how the history was with, natural heat and what infrared does at our studio and what we're doing at URBΔN ŌM and why infrared is so good, But at the time, again, none of this really makes a lot of sense. But the heat would have helped me. It was now all of a sudden my body doesn't feel so, they're like scrunched up and really feeling like all of this stuff is packed away inside of me, which again, I wouldn't have understood. All I knew was that I just felt tight and I just didn't move gracefully, But it didn't take long because I had read all those books and mentally I was like, I want to do this. I want to see what these books are talking about, like how you can feel, what the flexibility is like, what that breathing is like, what the relaxation is like. So even though I didn't know, I had read enough to be curious, and that's what got me to stick. But isn't it interesting though? Because it's either physical or maybe mental or maybe emotional or maybe book reading because you're a nerd. But either way, there's a way that it felt different. I think it was just different for us. And all of a sudden, I am now a person that doesn't mind moving. I'm a person that doesn't mind the soreness and the pain that you go through building muscle. And it wasn't really hard, repetitive, but it just felt fun. And of course, there's different classes, but my teacher would have, or the studio that I was attending, music. Like yours was a little bit more strict. So actually expand on that. But mine was, she had a dance background and it was amazing because it was flow and every sequence was different every time you would go there. And so you don't know what's going to happen. But you just know that she's going to really give you everything. You're going to do some standing. You're going to do some balancing. You're going to do some stretching. You'll do some relaxation at the end. She's going to work you hard. So I really liked that because my teacher was really, she was firm in her ways of teaching, and she was just like, no fluff. The fluff did come later, when we were exhausted 75 minutes after yoga, sweating in the heat. Then you're like, yes, that's fine. Tell me whatever the fluff is because I will listen now. But you're less stubborn. I know.
Tell me what you like.
So I like music. I like yoga with music, but I also like our hot yoga sequence that we teach at the studio that has come from your background. So what do you think about music and yoga and your style?
See, I like silence.
Yeah. I was like, I cannot.
But I think I just don't like a lot of noise in general.
Yeah.
I find it really too stimulating.
Yeah.
So to me, to have no music is really nice.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that.
So with the hot background, there is no music. It's somebody talking literally for 90 minutes, 60 minutes, however long it is. But it's kind of, their voice is that kind of like that white noise in the background.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're listening to it, and they say you only hear 20% of what somebody says.
Yes,
and I say quite a lot when I'm teaching.
Me too.
It all comes out. So I don't actually mind that it's quiet because I can hear my breath. I can hear them. There is no distraction, right? So it is that withdrawal of senses in the fact that there's no music. I am literally moving my body as I'm being told to move my body. Maybe I'm feeling it where they might suggest I'm feeling it so that I might know that I'm doing it right or not. Again, our bodies are all unique and different. So it's our own journey as to what we're feeling, just suggestions. Yeah. So I'm used to being quiet.
Yeah, no, and it's good to know that different people need different things though, right?
Then if I teach a flow, I used to use music, but I didn't feel that it brought anything to the party. Sure. I found it an annoyance.
Sure.
Because I used to listen to music when I was younger, but it was more generic.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said like, oh, so-and-so was top hits there. It's kind of, I'm that old that we got our music from recording the Sunday top 10.
I mean, we're not that far off. 10 years between the two of us. But I know what you're saying because it wasn't at the touch of our fingertips.
We didn't have Spotify.
Exactly.
It was.
Exactly.
We used to have a cassette in the middle, 2 speakers on the outside.
Yeah.
You would put your cassette in. If you're young and watching this, go to the museums. They're in there now. Honestly, they are. And
oh no, I know. I've seen them.
They really are.
I've got kids. I've taken them to the museums. I was like, oh no.
And then you would wait for like the introduction, top 10, press the button. Everybody had to be really quiet. And that was your music for the week.
Yeah.
When now you've got all genres on your Spotify. Yeah. Oh, I'll have a bit of this, do a shuffle, give me music.
Yeah.
So I just didn't really do it for me. I was never one to sit in my bedroom and listen to all the music. It was on. Yeah. I think it was either mum or dad played John Denver. Help. So it just then was, I wouldn't say a burden. It was just something else to do. Planning classes took time.
That's true.
And then if it was music, I didn't like music that had like lots of words in, because music is personal to people.
And I have seen it in our experience. We've seen people either like or not like our music or our teacher's music when they go off and teach. And, you know, we talk about that in our teacher training program because I think it's an important topic.
Oh, totally. And then the music can be too loud. I can't hear the teacher.
Exactly.
It's taken away from... Maybe I'm not really listening to my sensations that my body's experiences because of music. Other times, don't get me wrong, you know, I've been to some great classes and I'm sitting there, my down dog.
I mean, I do love if the person, you know, because it is such a skill to get the movement and the right style of class, because I think music works really well with it depends. If you've got high energy music with a high energy class and the movement and the music really go well together, it could be an incredible experience, you know, or background music if it's, you know, just gentle stretching. Yeah. But I agree with traditional yoga. I think that the way hot yoga is, I think music just doesn't go with it. Really, and it just really makes a bigger difference and a bigger impact, I think. Yeah. Because it can be another annoyance because, you know, hot yoga can be hot and bothering. And I think that it's really about creating that focus, and it's very traditional. And it's more meditative, like in a sense that it's a moving, high-powered meditation. Yeah. But the value of music. So I came from vinyasa and music, and you've come from hot yoga. But then your teacher
was a dance teacher.
Exactly. So we get influenced.
Had that kind of like the choreography, I can't say it.
It is true.
Of kind of moving with the music, where I'm kind of more functional music.
Yes, exactly.
More functional movement. Yeah.
I think that there's a lot to be said there as well, you know, and I just think that, you know what, we'll go on because, you know, when we come into our next episode, I think Yoga Mythbusters is a big topic I'd love to talk about. Yoga's too slow. I'm not flexible enough. You know, I really would love for us to expand on those topics. Yeah. So as we come to the end of our first episode together, it's just really great to be able to get to know each other and what our backgrounds are and how, I mean, I think we've always known this because you and I have been running teacher training together. We're running at the studio together, like we're partnering together, and we are different.
Opposites.
We're opposites, you know?
Totally opposites.
But isn't it? But it's incredible though, because Hatha means sun and moon, right? Like, and the idea is that it's blending these two opposites, the sun and the moon. Like we'll talk about this stuff as well, but we have those sun high energy practices and then we've got those relaxing practices, but they're both yoga and they're both important. And I feel like you and I are definitely Hatha. Like you've got like the sun and the moon coming together. But I think it helps me understand a different client base on what they like and what they don't like. Yeah. And where, you know, where all of this stuff has come from, why my body has moved so quickly into it is because I couldn't overthink it, because I was moving and dancing and it was just like a creative thing for me. It just made such a big difference to how my body progressed. But then, of course, I'm reading books after my practice. So I go into the meditation so much more. So I think that yoga became a lifestyle quicker because I was already reading books before I became the teacher training, because I was so interested at what is yoga. Like, why is this so different? Why does this feel so good and so different and so like I'm on the right path? If I want to achieve strength and physical fitness, but I'm not into just a physical body that's fit, because I'm into the mental, emotional wellness side of it. What is this yoga practice? What have I stumbled on and what is this? So I'm really interested in just taking this further now, you know, like let's talk more about yoga off the mat, you know, and let's go into our next episode, where we can talk about the major mythbusters. I think let's talk about some major yoga stories. We've been teaching for 13 to 18 years. We've got a lot of stories with a lot of students that we've seen. We've heard a lot. We've seen a lot.
Why I can't go to yoga.
So I think, let's talk about that more. Let's expand and let's think of students without, of course, naming them, but let's think of, people that we've known over the years that probably said those certain limiting beliefs and how they've gotten over to the other side and perhaps found a little bit more relaxation. So great, Ali. Thank you for joining me on this episode. And I love that we're going to continue to create a community, I'm hoping, for people that maybe didn't understand yoga, maybe don't understand it, want to hear more about it, and why we are so obsessed about talking about the different classes that we offer and the different styles and why yoga has been such a big thing for us, So thank you. More to come.
Thank you. It's been great.
Good.